Hello everybody and welcome back to RP1. As you may be able to tell from the title, we are working on the capstone launches today, and that means that we are going to be completing both of our early rocketry programs and then paving the way to move on to bigger and better things. If you missed our short earlier in the week, we did this little launch. It wasn't anything too spectacular. We just needed to exit the atmosphere with a camera experiment, take a few pictures of the ground below us, and then retrieve it safely. So I decided to just speed run through this part of the footage and just show you that we had successfully completed it. You can check out our shorts to see more of it. But see here, we are almost done with our deadline. We only have one more contract left, the 5,000 kilometers downrange, and with this one, we're a little bit farther from our deadline, but also with only one contract left to remain. So let's go ahead and start with our 5,000 kilometer downrange. And I was hoping that we could use the rockets that we already had created, but unfortunately they just weren't, it wasn't sufficing. So I decided I'm going to make something a little bit more advanced, a little bit more lightweight, better engines, better technology in it. And so therefore I decided I'm just going to build it from scratch. So in order to complete the contract, we did need to have some sounding payload in it. That's what that top tank is. And now I'm putting in the fuel for it. We are using isogrid tanks, which are more expensive, but they do weigh less. And so this rocket should have much better performance for what it is. Throwing on an Aerojet SRB. This is primarily to help with ullage, so that way we don't have to deal with any pesky hot staging. Alright, now times for the bumper rocket. We're going to use the RD108 as our main lifting engine. I do like the 108, 107 configuration, and we're going to be using these in our satellite program going forward. But for this rocket, we are actually going to go with the RD101, which we'll be unlocking in our next science node, the early rocketry. We will be going back and forth right now, showing the 108, trying to figure out what is going to be best, but eventually we settle with the RD101. One good thing about the 108, it has such a huge burn time. I think like somewhere to the tune of 208 seconds. So this will end up being a very massive rocket, which I don't think we really want to deal with this time around. Hence why we decide to fall back onto a smaller engine. Already this thing is becoming massive. And for those who may not be aware, the tyranny of the rocket equation refers to the fact that the heavier the item is that you want to launch into space, the more fuel you'll need to lift it. But of course, the more fuel you put in your rocket to lift that piece of mass, the heavier that whole in total becomes, so you'll need more fuel to lift that, and so on and so forth, until you end up with this giant behemoth of a rocket just to send something 5,000 kilometers downrange. That just won't cut it. We had a thrust to weight ratio of 1.00, so this was not ideal. So this is where we go back to the drawing board, come back to the RD100 and adjust it to fit. It doesn't have nearly as long of a burn time, so we're not going to need nearly as much fuel. And I'm choosing to go with the technology that we haven't unlocked yet, because I know that by the time we do end up sending this rocket out, I want to have this technology available. So we're just going to test fly it with that science in mind. So now we have a much more manageable size of a bumper rocket. This is more reasonable. 97.65 seconds of burn time. This is definitely not going to be part of our orbital series. This is only going to be downrange capable. However, it will teach us some valuable lessons, and pave the way forward to bigger and better things. So now we're just going to do a test flight, make sure everything works as well. We didn't have any electrical charge on our science probe, so it was making the staging a little precarious and a little frustrating. But with all said and done, let's just do one final test, make sure everything is good, and it was. So let's throw some decals on this. We're not going to be using this rocket very much. In fact, it may not even be worth tooling it, but we will. But nonetheless, let's give it some design. So this is the Bumper Rocket 1, since it has an upgraded engine. And we're gonna put the little science logo on it, even though this isn't a science rocket. But yeah, that is done. The Bumper Rocket 1 is ready. We're gonna go ahead and put that into the queue, but instead of just jumping right into the launch, let's go ahead and do our second build of the day, and that is to do the Advanced Biological Experiment and Return. So we are going to need some sounding rocket payload, or sounding payload in there. So we're going to use that, the sounding payload requirements as the nose cone itself. I'm going to throw on a parachute here because we do need to recover it safely. And we're going to adjust the probe core to be kind of like the interstage area. And we're going to make very much just a bullet style sounding rocket using the RD101s. Same as before. So we put a decoupler there to separate everything. Put the probe core back. And we have our payload. So now all we need to do is create a rocket that can just get it up high enough. It doesn't need any downrange distance. It literally just needs to cross the Kármán line into space. A little bit higher, I think it's 150 kilometers it requires. But so essentially, as long as we can get something that burns long enough to reach space, and as long as our payload is capable of coming back down safely, this is a gimme, really. I don't understand why this one's the capstone. Basically because it's the Advanced Biological Experiment, and you have to get the science in order to unlock it. But nonetheless, the Abe-1 is ready to go. We're going to do test flight. See, I'm putting decals on before I even test flew it because I'm just that confident in this this design. As long as we don't have any engine failures, we'll be good. And all that I needed to do there was remember to turn on the experiment. I am going to separate those final stages, but it really didn't matter. We didn't have to. But without any further ado, let's hop into our launches for today's episode. It is a relatively short episode, but that's only because we just finished up exactly what we need to do pretty efficiently. So I'm going to do some time warping, going to get myself the science that I need. Unfortunately, I did waste a little bit of time in doing so, and also we ended up putting ourselves into a deficit by hiring more researchers. It did get us the technology we needed, but at the cost of our agency wasting time, because when it finally came time to build the rocket, we were severely in debt and unable to make anything. We were losing $93 by the day. We were making money by the month, so as the months went on, we would get paid, but every single day we were just losing money, like it was going out of style. So I did some aggressive hiring and firing, and I did some moving around, and eventually I got myself to a point where my daytime was in the positive, so I was able to just time warp. You don't want to press the auto time warp button, but just to manually time warp it forward, and we saw our debt being erased. And then once we had $12 in our pocket, that's when we could start working on rockets again. But here we are, first launch of the day. Bumper Rocket 1 with the Sounding Rocket 2 on it, headed 5,000 kilometers downrange. And as per usual, we're using Smart ASS to guide our launch. We're dropping 1 degree every 25 meters per second of acceleration. We do have our tail fins angled to get some spin stabilization. Not entirely necessary for this, but I did find it a little bit easier, and so I decided to go with it. Relatively cloudless day here at the KSC. The people below will be able to watch this rocket from miles. "36 seconds of burn time remaining." We're now passing 60-degree heading mark. We're now at 30 kilometers above the surface. Our apoapsis is rapidly approaching the Kármán line. And with that, we will now be in space. And I want to leave my angle at 45 degrees for this final bit. I found the best way to get that last little push of distance is to gain the height necessary. Our apoapsis is now passing 400 kilometers above the surface, 402 to be exact. We are going to separate that lower stage. We're just going to hold still for a second. We want to make sure that our next stages fire once they're actually in space. And this isn't the most ideal angle. Like, efficiency speaking, we should be pointed at the horizon and maximize our prograde maneuver. However, this is how I ended up finding it to work in testing, so this is how we're going to go. We're going to raise our apoapsis a little bit, or raise our altitude a little bit, come a lot closer to our apoapsis. And at a minute to go, we kill our time warp and get ourselves ready to fire. SRB goes, hot staging happens, separation clean, no ullage problems, no engine failures. And now this Aerobee engine is going to take us for quite a bit. It's going to push us forward, and hopefully it gives us enough distance that we complete the 5,000 kilometer downrange contract. While we kind of sit here and hover above the planet, I do want to talk about some of our goals for this next part of the series. With the end of this episode, we will have completed the 2 suborbital programs and the early rocketry program. And so we're going to need to move on to what to do next. And I've done some playing around in my free time, and I think we are going to choose the Heavy Satellites program. We're going to do the Heavy Satellites program, and we're going to also pick back up the X-Planes program again, because I think getting our humans ready for flight, getting pilots tested in cockpits and things like that, getting experience will be helpful. And then with the Heavy Satellites program, not only is it something that I've never done before, so I'm interested in that, but I believe Heavy Satellites will easier lead us into human spaceflight because the payloads that we're lifting are already going to be heavier than simply just like a little Sputnik. There we go, hopping back into the HUDed version, and we can see that we have successfully made it 5,000 kilometers downrange. More than 5,000 kilometers downrange. So we're just going to time warp till that explodes and then see how we did. And a whopping 12,873 ground distance. Not bad. So we've got another launch, and that is the Advanced Biological Experiment. This one's going to be a lot easier of a launch, basically just kind of straight up, straight down, but nonetheless, very important. Lots of science to be had. Not a lot of science to be gotten, because The advanced biological experiment takes quite a bit of time. I think it takes like a total of 24 or maybe 48 hours in space to run the entire experiment. So we're gonna just be getting a drop in the bucket by just peeking into space. Nonetheless, this small mammal will be making great leaps in science. RSS Reborn looking beautiful as ever. And I'm just tapping on the D key. I'm not even using Smart ASS for this. I'm just kind of eyeballing my direction. I just want a little bit of horizontal direction to my flight, so we're not just straight up and down, but no need to really control it with the precision that we do for most of our rockets. And with that, we burnt out, and our apoapsis is 500 kilometers, and all we needed to do was cross 140. So we are looking good. And this experiment doesn't produce any science until it's actually crossed the Kármán line. So now we can see that it is running, and indeed takes 23 hours, 59 minutes. We can see from our missions that we have successfully completed all parameters. All we have to do now is return it home safely. And after we brought it down through space, the only science we made was 0.3 of a point. So I wouldn't really say that this is a science rocket in the slightest. Once we start going orbital and we unlock things like heat shields and better re-entry, that's when we can really make use of the advanced biological experiment. Until then, though, this is just to prove that we can. Yeah, I'm very excited for these upcoming episodes. In my test flight, I successfully managed to build a capable rocket for the first mission on the first try, and I was very pleased with that. And so I don't think the concepts between light satellites and heavy satellites are going to change all that much. What's gonna be the big factor is the power, the ability to lift heavier items. And so I think with the RD-108s and the 107s, the side boosters, and some of the heavy orbital rocketries that we've unlocked in the previous series, or the previous season, excuse me, I think it's manageable. I think we can do it. So I'm excited to try something new, try a different program, and I hope you are as well. So we're going to go ahead and bring our rocket safely down, or our payload. No longer any rocket to this, but bring it safely down into the water, collect our animal, collect our experiment, and call it a day. So we did waste a little bit of our time when we had to regain some of our funds because we were in a deficit. However, all in all, I still think that we're kind of on track with my goal of trying to be more efficient with our time. As we see here, it's the 4th of August, 1956, which is late for our early rocket development program, because we're supposed to have that done by 1955. Technically, we did finish that rocket earlier. We just didn't complete the program, but as you see here, we went past our deadline. But nonetheless, we got everything done. Here, we completed right beforehand, so that's pretty good. Pretty happy with how everything came out, all things considered. So let's go ahead and complete those programs. We would have gotten a little bit of funding left from the other program. There were a couple optional contracts we could have done, but there's really no point in holding on to them now. Let's just go ahead and take the Early Satellites Heavy program and look at that funding. Just straight clear 129.5 thousand every year until the deadline. We can take this as fast or normal speed, but I think we're going to do it at normal just because we've never done it before. We want to be able to allow ourselves enough time. The X-Plane program, however, I'm going to try to do a little bit faster than before because there's quite a lot to do, but it does give us a significant amount of funding that's going to be very helpful in our program. So hopefully we can not only utilize the science and the experience gained from the X-Plane program, but we can channel some of that money into our satellites program as well. I'm going to look through all the different leaders, and you can kind of like go along and see what the different benefits are, but the one that we end up going with is Sergei Korolev, and that is for his integration speed and cost of rockets is lessened, and any human-rated spaceflight integration costs and speed are lessened. So that is that's going to be ideal soon because we're going to be launching a lot of planes. We're going to be building the early satellites program. I don't think has any, we don't do any humans up in space with that. I don't think that's human rated at all. However, the X-Plane is, and they're all going to kind of feed into each other, kind of connect and help each other out. The one problem is the materials research node will take us longer to research. So that's the only downside. And all in all, that wasn't too bad of a downside. So I think that's the leader we're going to go with. And so I think that is where we are going to complete today's episode. There's nothing that I need to talk about what is going on in the next episode that I haven't already discussed earlier. So I think instead I'm just going to say, let me know what your thoughts about our program going forward. Are you excited for the heavy satellites program? Have you ever done it before? If you do have any tips, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. I always love reading your comments. But anyways, that is where I'm going to leave today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more RP1. If you did, please consider subscribing. If you aren't already, drop me a like, let me know your thoughts, and I will see y'all in the next one. Take care.